All right, so now we're recording. Today I'm talking with Scott Hyde. Scott Hyde is behind Sunobi, which is a brand new proposal software that I've seen, and it is really, really beautiful, and it's doing some exciting stuff. And I know software and proposals is one of those things that every single solar rep deals with, and it's also something that we all know can definitely be better. So I'm excited to talk to Scott about his background in Sunobi and all that good stuff. So Scott, thank you so much. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got to a point where you're running Sunobi?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's an honor. Hope I don't say anything too ridiculous. So I forewarn you ahead of time. If anything gets out of hand, I apologize.
No, those are the best interviews, so don't worry about
that. You want to know how we got into Sunobi in particular, or how we got into solar?
Well, let's start with you. So obviously, okay. I would assume someone has I would assume you have a solar background to get to a place where you're creating a proposal software for solar. So you can just tell me about your background and how
Sure.
you got up to the point where you said, hey, we need to do this. We need to jumpstart this thing called Sunobi.
So, and I guess to start off, I never want this to sound like it's just about me, because it isn't. I happen to be a spokesperson, and my role with Sunobi is that, but it's, Sunobi is a mix of a lot of talent and a lot of people that all come from very similar backgrounds. And so while my story may have some unique characteristics that are specific to me, I think that the trajectory of how I started to where I'm at in Sunobi is very common to the rest of my partners. And that's part of what makes Sunobi different, to be honest. We all started knocking doors, selling a handful of things before solar. And so we were used to being on the doors and selling products door to door, which, comes with a lot of rejection and a lot of character building days. Anyone who's done it knows that that's what happens. So I think that as we build this product, so much of our own experience has shaped what we wanted to feel like when we're in a home with software. One of the core values of Sunobi is for it to be delight to use. We want it to be delightful in every way. And in large measure, that comes as a result of experiencing our other solar products that were on the market that just wasn't delightful. I started, the first time I sold solar was down in San Diego with a company called Bright Energy. They were an offshoot of Protection One, which would have been recently acquired, or they recently acquired Pinnacle. So I was from the Pinnacle tree. Anyone paying attention to that side of the business, selling door to door, that's where I came from. I got recruited by some family members who I love dearly and are still working with me to this day. And they convinced me to go knock doors and do what seemed like an absolutely ridiculous job at the time they were telling me. I started older than I think a lot of people. I started when I was like 29. I think everyone else started selling something door to door, and they were like, 20, 22 or something like that.
So what year is this? Like when you first get on the doors?
Well, now you're asking me how old I am.
No, okay. So you don't.
Dangerous. No, that's fine. I'm not worried about it. I'm 43. Anyone keeping track? I'm 43. I'm an Aries. I like long walks on the beach and virgin Mai Tais. I'm kidding.
Awesome. Well, you're in San Diego, so I assume you like the beach.
I love. Yeah, there's nothing better than the beach to me.
So you mentioned that you started in other industries. It sounded like your family had experienced door-to-door sales, and then how long did it take you before you made it to solar?
Started in 2010 selling alarms. 2009, 2010 is my first time selling alarms, and then 2014 I started selling solar.
Okay, so you had 4 years of knocking doors is like multiple university degrees in sales and business and communication. So that's obviously you had a very large amount of experience when you made it to solar. And then what was that transition like?
Beautiful. I loved it. I was never like a really great alarm sales guy. I wasn't bad. I was good, but I wasn't like the guy that people be like, oh my gosh, did you hear how many deals that guy threw down? Like, that wasn't me. in large part because the gift of brevity has never been my strong suit. So I would spend way too much time talking to customers and like basically putting them to bed. Like I'd sell an alarm and I'd be putting to bed like 11:30. Like, oh yeah, this is gonna be great. And I'd be going through everything just way too long, just selling too long. But I got a ton of referrals. Like most of my business was referrals, and I'd collect every activation under the sun. You know what I mean? Like I could get them to give me anything they wanted. But I also felt like that to hit some of those numbers and alarms, it just didn't quite fit my personality. It just wasn't as pushy, is what it felt like to me. And I'm not suggesting that's the case, but it felt that way to me. And so alarms felt like solar felt like the more transparent, the more honest I was, and the more direct I was, the easier it was to sell. So I loved it. Plus, I also moved out of Seattle and moved down to California, and it was like, every day's sunny? This is incredible. I don't have to wear a slicker and get dumped on all day. This sounds great. So that part was nice too.
Yeah, I'm originally from Central Coast, California, so up a little north of Santa Barbara, Lompoc. But I remember that's the one thing you don't. When I was growing up, I always took it for granted was like, not having the seasons. And then I moved to Utah, and I don't live in Utah anymore, but I was in Utah, and it was like winters are cold, and there's there's a few months where it's hot, and then like the rest, but it's like 40 all these other times. And like in California, California, it's like you're this weird little, you're like in this weird bubble where when it's above 80, it's like really hot. And when it's below like 60, it's really cold. And most of the year it kind of floats in that little range. And it's definitely,
Californians are bougie, man. We get out the Patagonia crap at 50 degrees, like we're freezing to death, and wearing your parkas and hoodies just for an escape, just an excuse to wear it, but most of the time it's pretty great. So when I moved down and started selling in San Diego out of Seattle, it was such a unique environment for me to sell in because I just wasn't used to it. It was sunny all the time, and I sold year round in Seattle, so I was selling in the rain constantly. Summers were great. Like, don't get me wrong, summertime is in Seattle after 4th of July to basically September is unbelievable. It's gorgeous, but it's that way in California all year round. You know what I mean? So it became harder and harder for me to want to go back, and solar became easier and easier to sell simply because I felt like, I felt like I was providing something to someone that they already needed, and that I wasn't adding a bill, I was replacing one, saving money, and it felt good to sell it. And the more transparent I was, like I said, the more honest, the easier it was to sell. And so I became very, very good at selling solar, much better. I was a much, much better solar rep than I was an alarm rep by a country mile.
Yeah, that seems to be a common trend with a lot of the people that I've talked to. Some people just came directly to solar, and they don't know any other way. And if you ask them to like consider going to a different industry, they'd be like, "What? No, why?" And I've never been I was never a door-to-door guy, but my background was in fitness, and I was a fitness manager working for corporate gyms, and I was selling personal training. And I think kind of what you're referring, I say it's like, there's more to it, but I always say solar, it's like it feels like an easy sale, but not necessarily that. It's just like, it's a sale or something that you can sell that you truly believe in. And obviously, like we sell other things, and we know we're supposed to believe in it, or we have to believe in the value of it, and like we kind of work on it. But at the same time, it doesn't feel natural. And that was kind of the way personal training was, because no matter how, even if I knew that this person like was a millionaire, and like I'm talking to these celebrities in Beverly Hills or wherever I was training at, and it was like, even if I knew that, to me, I couldn't see myself spending $2,000 a month to work for somebody to help me work out. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that's just like my thought process was like, that's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And it was hard for me to sell that to people, because the majority of people maybe can't afford that. Maybe they're not qualified. And if I like dive into that and kind of explored it a little bit more, I think it was more, I didn't really believe that it was worth as much as I advertised it for, just because that's just the way I was raised. I was never raised in a household where we'd spend $2,000 a month on anything. But then when you move to solar, it's like you're able to find something that you really, really believe in. And it kind of sounds similar to how you felt with alarms, because obviously home security and alarms is great, but at the same time, it's probably a lot more put based on like selling based on fear, and that's probably
For
just
sure.
not as fun as telling people like it's a bill swap. Like it makes sense. You help the environment, and we can most likely save you money. I mean, that's why I think most people come to solar and are amazed, because it just seems like a win-win-win.
I agree with you. And again, I hope that doesn't come across as me putting home security sales down. I
No,
attribute
that's fine.
so
I
much
love
of
it,
my-
because I tell home security guys, if you're listening to this somehow, talk to me. We'll get you into solar, and you'll love life a lot
Yeah,
more.
I mean,
So
I learned so much selling home security about how to really draw out emotions and talk about things, in a way that would be more visceral in a sale. And so those are really valuable skill sets. The frequency in which you can close a deal in alarms in comparison to solar, right, is probably 4-to-1, right? Like you can get maybe even more than that, 10-to-1 in some guys. I was probably more a 4-to-1 kind of guy, but you can close so many more, and so it builds this habit of winning and this habit of closing deals that's so rewarding. But because the sales cycle traditionally has been so short with alarms, that's a draw, right? Like, hey, come sell. You're going to sell 2 or 3 today, or 10, or whatever it is, and make a bunch of money. And you do it again the next day, the next day, the next day, and write your own check, right? In solar, you're not necessarily selling 10 a day. You're trying to sell 1 or 2 a day. And if you're doing that, that's fantastic too, right? For the most part. And I'm talking about self-genning, right? Which is, again, we get into conversations about setters and closers and things like that. But I love selling solar. It was a blast. I still sell to this day. I closed a deal this morning, by the way, 9 kilowatt. I'm super stoked about it. Thank
Congrats.
you, Scott. Scott Hollyoak, if you're listening, you're the man. Thanks for saying yes. But it's
awesome. So
our experience selling like door to door from that standpoint. And my partners had the same one, selling alarms, then transitioned into solar. But then selling solar door to door, we started off selling leases before loans were even an option, and moved into loans as they became more and more popular, and the economics worked out better. Right, like when we first started loans, you'd sell a loan with a 12% interest rate, and it just didn't pencil. So as the market shifted and changed, we were no longer wanting to sell leases because banks finally got on board and started offering products with better interest rates, longer terms, made it more comparable to a lease. But obviously the upside of having the tax credit, things like that, made it so that we wanted to migrate more and more towards ownership and less towards leases. And the more we looked at those economics, the more it felt like, man, I'm actually not doing my customers as much of a favor selling leases and PPAs as I am selling loans. And so we migrated more, and the industry moved that way too, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still a tremendous amount of people who sell PPAs, and there's definitely a great market for that. But as we moved towards that, we were selling, and it was like, man, the process to get a proposal, the process to get all the right pieces in front of a customer to make a decision was so cumbersome that trying to recruit guys over from the same world that I lived in to come sell solar was painful, because they're like, what's the process? And you show them the process. It's like, so how many times I got to enter that information? I got into a lead form, and then I got to send it again to someone else to do a proposal, and they're going to send it back to me the next day or the day after, or they're going to send it back. I mean, this is when we first started, right? It was painful. So you had to really love solar, I think, to stick with it. And even then, like back then, we were we were still making great money, but we were making $200 or $300 a kilowatt, self-genning everything, right? Now you got guys making way more than that, self-generating everything else. But you had to really love solar to be able to sell for making the kind of money that people then compared to what people are making now. And the processes that we have now are so much better. It's evolved and grown, and so it's been great. It's been a great.
So was that the main kind of pain point that you guys that kind of got the wheels spinning on Sunobi, was the idea of having to submit something and have someone else create the proposal, and the sales rep had to be waiting on that proposal? Is that kind of like the main thing that caused you, or was it?
It's one. There's a lot. There's a ton. I mean, I could give you probably 15.
So how long ago was Sunobi started?
A little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because by then, like already we had these ones in the marketplace. Everyone knows Solo. Everyone knows. I'm blanking on the other ones, but Solo is obviously the probably the number one. I would
Solo,
assume in
Titan,
this space.
Solar Graph, Aurora.
Correct.
Yeah.
So with those four, because I believe all those four were already established probably 2 years ago when you guys were starting out. When you were starting out Sunobi, did you feel that those four, what problems were those four not answering that you guys felt like you could answer?
A few of them. So I think that when we were looking at our desire as a company to grow, like keep in mind, we started a solar company called Coda about 2 years prior to this, right? And so we were a sales engine, like so many others, that was relying on a lot of different things to be successful. EPCs certainly is our main partner. Their relationships with finance companies and distribution companies to provide the product we were selling. We couldn't sell something that an EPC didn't provide, right? And so a lot of times it was like, well, what is your process? And so an EPC could have a process that allowed solo or siting or something like that. Other times they didn't. Sometimes they're like, we'll do the proposal for you using Aurora and hand you the proposal, then you guys figure it out. We then go on like lenders' calculators and figure out the payments and things like that and try to present those as best we could. So while those pieces of software existed, our ability to sell a deal also was dictated in large part by what the EPC allowed us to use or what they would accept. So as we grew, right, and some software became more popular than others, it became somewhat easier to say, well, that's a process we understand. We'll migrate towards that and use it. But scaling was a huge problem, right? So if you're looking for what problems were in general for why we created Sunobi, scaling across multiple markets with multiple EPCs was a massive problem. Because everybody had their different process. And even those that use the same process, you still have different logins, right? So we'll take Solo, for example, since it's the first one you use, not that it's the most important, but it's the first one that you brought up. If I had a Solo login for one EPC, I needed a different Solo login for a different EPC. And so if I brought a rep on, it wasn't that super complicated to figure that out, but there's room for human error where if I log in with one and because my phone or my iPad would store a password, I'd log in and I'd try to go quick, and suddenly I'd find myself designing it or requesting a proposal for a different EPC with all their lender links and everything else they're attached to, which meant their dealer fees were all different. And I'm like, oh shoot, that's not the right one I wanted to do. And now I'm in a position where I've got this proposal I'm showing a customer, I'm like, oh, whoops, that's the wrong EPC. Hold on, I got to redo this. It just became kind of messy. Or you'd sell one, sign the lender links, right? And then you end up signing the home improvement deals through your own DocuSign to a different installer, and you'd be like, well, what am I going to pick now? I got the lender signed with attached to one EPC and the HIA attached to another. This is messy. So scaling with simplicity was a problem you're trying to solve. Sales reps, as you know.
And that makes sense too, because I apologize for cutting you off.
No,
but that makes sense too, because you are probably looking at it from the side of the salesperson, where a lot of those proposal tools were created not necessarily from someone that's actually in the field, with someone that knows that if you're selling in multiple different markets, it requires you to have multiple different EPCs. Every EPC has different policies and rules and everything, and you have to. But at the same time, it's not as. Kind of what you're talking about is really everything right now, or the way it was, or the way it usually is kind of so compartmentalized within specific companies and specific regions and specific, like everything, it's friction. It's just difficult to manage and to use and to handle those different logins. And it also prevents people from really that's why there's so much people hopping from one business to the next business and from one sales order to the next sales order, is because there isn't really a lot of cohesiveness, or there isn't really any solutions that kind of help people with selling everywhere, for example. So it sounds like that is you came at it from with the perspective of a solar salesperson, which a lot of these softwares probably didn't have that, at least not at first.
We 100% came at it as a solar sales rep, because that's all we were at the time, right? When we first started. As Coda grew, we became an EPC as well. And so it lent a different perspective to the software that we didn't have before. And so we started to evolve that way as well. And that became great. So Coda became this wonderful sandbox for the software to be used in. And at the time, Sunobi and Coda weren't separate companies, which they are now. But at the time, Sunobi is just a piece of software we were building to help ourselves, to really create solutions to our own problems. We had no intent or interest in licensing it or selling it to other people simply because we were going to use it as our own competitive advantage. We were only trying to solve problems that existed for us, right? What we found as we were building is that the same problems that we experienced, everyone else is having too. It's just, we got lucky in that the team that we assembled to build it was very, very, very talented and created things that was like, people started looking at it and saying like, dude, what is that? You know, I'm like, and they were people that weren't sales guys. They were like lenders and EPCs or distribution partners going like, why are you not giving that out to people? And we're like, well, that's going to take our competitive advantage. And in truth, what we realized as well was, and I want to come back to the question about, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I want to come back to the question about what were the other reasons why we did it. But as we got to that point, we recognized that we had a chance to actually really affect the industry in a meaningful way quicker than we could as just Coda. And that we could do something that we felt passionate about, which was, number one, providing a really seamless, fun, fast, easy way for sales reps to sell deals. And the second thing we wanted to do was provide a platform where education could be done so that the complaints that happened, they gave black eyes in the industry that I had seen from the beginning, a way to be solved. Right? Like in truth, again, like I said at the beginning, the more transparent you were with solar, the easier it was to sell. The only time you ever end up with problems with a customer is when either you haven't lived up to what you said you're going to do, right? Or if you weren't transparent about the process. If you left out key ingredients about net metering, or you left out key components of how the tax credit works.
Or even how long the process takes. Because
right.
That's something that we see a lot.
Yes,
yeah.
If you are not transparent about that and you don't give your customers proper expectations, then they get upset naturally. So we wanted to create a platform where the education side was done in a really beautiful, meaningful way, and they gave reps a way to talk about it in a way that didn't seem like they're just making stuff up on the back of a napkin. Because up to that point, no matter which one of those pieces of software that you talked about, right, you could get a single PDF of what the numbers were, and you still had to rely on the rep to adequately describe and explain what the process is going to be like and create proper expectations. You're leaving that up to the whims of whoever the trainer was on the rep and how great the rep is, right? So, which leads me to this other thing about what I didn't like about the other piece of software. Do you want me to go into that, or did I speak too much? And
no, that's fine. Go ahead. So no, it's all good. I like it because I think you have shared experiences and thoughts as a lot of people that will listen to this as far as what their frustrations have been. So I'm excited to get more into how you guys were able to like accomplish that. But yeah, so what were your other main frustrations other than kind of the multiple logins for all these different markets, which is a big one, because I know reps that have 5 different solo logins, and that doesn't even make sense, but that's just the way things are.
Hard. Yeah. And again, these things are like academic issues, right? That like in reality don't really change in too much the experience that a customer has with the rep. It's just the process is so full of friction that people lose interest, right? In growing their company. It's like, man, you have this kind of decision to make. If you really want to scale and be a company of any sort of size and stature where you're affecting a greater change than like a handful of people a month, you have a decision to make about how you want to build your proposal department or how you want to build that avenue, right? Mm-hmm. So I also worked for a company called Ion, which was Vision Solar at the time. They hired, when Bright Energy kind of fell apart, I went to work for Vision, and it later became Ion. And their business model was different than the way we currently run things, but their business model was they had a whole department that was dedicated just to creating proposals, which is a different avenue to take, right? Like if you're not going to have your reps submit a bill to someone else offshore, like a solo kind of company where they're creating a proposal and sending it back, then you have to decide that you want to own that process yourself. And owning that process yourself means you have a bunch of people in a warehouse, your own warehouse, right? Or your own office staff. You've trained those people. They're working through a different piece of software like Aurora, creating a proposal. And now you're worrying about the queue, how fast you can turn that around. And so a rep's going to go, hey, I got an appointment for this, and they're going to set their appointment. And now you have a whole personnel department that you have to manage. And that's in some ways not any different than what Solo's doing. It's just that you're owning that process instead of outsourcing it. As a philosophy, I never agreed with it. I didn't like it, didn't agree with it from the beginning, because what we're essentially saying is my ability to scale and grow and the speed in which I can get a proposal is largely determined on the quality of talent that's hired and the human capital you're willing to expend and how fast you can train them. So let's say that I went and hired, we have these other, like before this thing recorded, you're asking, hey, is Sunobi going to have other products to offer or other industries they can attract, like a HVAC or a roofing or whatever. Let's say that you had a whole HVAC company that wanted to come into solar, which certainly is happening, right? And they've got 1,000 reps across the country that they want to bring on board. And you happen to have the EPC platform to do it. But your model is based on, I'm going to house all of my people to do proposals. Well, now those 1,000 reps that are coming in their ability to turn around a deal is largely dependent on how fast and how big your department is. So now I've got to go say, cool, I got you 1,000 reps that are coming on board. That sounds great. I need another 30 to 60 days to hire all the new people to go create these proposals to send them back to you. I now have a staffing issue. I have a human capital problem. The cog in the wheel that's necessary to turn that engine is human capital. That feels like a problem that I don't want to have. I don't like that problem.
And so your solution to that problem is giving the reps more power in the process.
For sure. So now if you go down that road, right, giving the reps power, it opens up a couple of categories of problems that have been said to me since the beginning that I really disliked. And again, you're asking me why we built it. Here's some of the impetus for why we built it the way we did, and why we built the business philosophy the way we did. Well, let me ask you, see if you come up with the same answers. Why would you not, or why would someone not give a rep the ability to do their own proposals?
Because they don't trust the rep to design the system properly.
Bingo. So let's start with just that one. You're a sales rep, right?
Yeah.
You have sold solar in the past, right?
Yeah, I sell solar, but I'm a marketing guy. So I do lead gen. I'm a marketing agency. I work with sales reps. I sell solar, but literally deals that fall into my lap, which is actually a few.
Sure.
For the most part,
you sell leads sometimes too, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. If you're selling leads, do you like the idea that someone would tell you that you're not trustworthy?
No.
Inherently, that doesn't feel good, right? Mm-hmm. Like someone telling you, you're dishonest by nature. You're a sales guy, so you must be dishonest. I didn't like that to begin with. The whole reason I got into solar was because I liked the feeling that solar lent itself to be more honest. And so now I have someone telling me, I can't give you power to do your own proposals because you're not honest enough to trust. I can't trust that you as a sales rep, by virtue of your title, not by your character, but by virtue of your title, I don't trust you to create a proposal correctly. That drove me nuts. What's another reason why you shouldn't do your own proposals?
I'm sure that's probably the biggest one. I don't know. What other ones would you think of as manager to a team of reps? I think that's it. I think you wouldn't do it right, but you wouldn't do it right because you're not trained enough, or your time is best spent prospecting, focusing on sales and your customers. Right. And while reps don't necessarily kind of behave that way, that's the way that management would think ideally, is if you have a person specifically focused on the designing and then one person specifically focused on selling it, and that's just kind of keeping them separated is the best way for. And I guess also you don't want to provide them with too much ability, because you're the whole kind of industry, the way it's built with the dealer model and business owners and keeping the proposals separate. And then you have companies like Power, they don't allow you to talk to they don't want you talking to the installation company. They do that because they don't really want to provide people with the tools to make them realize that they could do it on their own too, if they really wanted to. So it's more trying to keep people focused on one little specific aspect so that they don't have the opportunity to grow as much as they might like to.
That's right. And as a whole, that entire line of thinking drove me nuts. And the reason why is because it inherently suggests that a sales rep, besides being dishonest about the design, is also not capable of understanding the structure of the way the industry works and that they won't treat it fairly. It suggests that a rep is not intelligent enough to do their own designs. One argument of saying, well, you're not trained enough, suggests that it's too hard to be trained. And I found it very odd that I'd get a proposal back and I'd be the one to do the corrections. Like I get a proposal back and I look at it and be like, well, actually you put the panels on the wrong roof plane and there isn't a tree there like you think it is. And the shade looks like it's really off. Why is that? Oh, I made a mistake. Wait a minute. I thought I was the dumb one and the dishonest one. So some of those things that kept coming back, that philosophy that kept coming back, put a chip on our shoulder about, again, from as a sales rep, put a chip on our shoulder about how we wanted to build a proposal tool inside of Sunobi. Now, Sunobi has far more tools in it than just proposal tool. If you ask me what Sunobi was, I wouldn't say it's a proposal tool. I'd say it's a sales enablement platform that happens to have a proposal tool in it. But the concept too of like, we need to make sure that we isolate these different job descriptions in the sales process is really a protectionist sort of mentality that lacks abundance, in my opinion. It's simply saying like, I can't give you too much information because once you know how to do it, I lose my job. That to me tells me we have some inefficiencies in the space as it is. And as we're talking about, like, in order for this solar to really take off across the country, like right now it's really effective in a handful of markets, right? And there's some other states that are moderately effective and then some other states that aren't effective at all. And it really just comes down to a grid parity, right? How close we are on a loan product to making it a savings for a customer. And they start looking at the cost of solar. Well, why is the cost of solar so much more expensive in America than it is in, say, Southern America or Germany or Europe or things like that, or Australia? It's drastically less expensive in those places. And the reason is because we've taken out, in those other countries, taken out so many of the soft costs associated with it that it can be done for a lot cheaper. So here's an interesting story that I'm trying to get to my point about this. I'm down in Arizona with Titan doing a Titan launch sort of thing. Like Titan's one of our customers down there. We're doing this launch as one of Titan's installer summits they have. And they have a handful of sales engines that come in. And the sales engine is looking at Sunobi. We're having this conversation. He's going through it and he says to me, I don't know if I can give this to my reps. I said, why not? He goes, dude, it's too powerful. I feel like they're not going to need me anymore. I said, well, what do you do for them now? And he goes, well, I provide their proposals and their pricing. I said, is that it? He says, yeah. Well, I'm not sure what kind of company that really is if all you're doing is providing a proposal for somebody. Like, if you're a sales engine, the only real thing to separating you from your reps is that you're holding back the secret of how to create a proposal. Like, at some point, they're going to figure that out with Sunobi or without and realize that you're not providing enough value to make money for them, right? Or make money on them. So when we built Sunobi, again, the idea was we wanted to empower sales reps to scale as fast as they could in as healthy a way possible, with providing the least amount of friction to do so as we could, which meant that we wanted to enable them to do their own proposals. We wanted them to do it in a way that was very fast, so you could do it inside of 90 seconds, on the doorstep if needed, but certainly in the home. Have the ability to bounce around and like change whatever variables are necessary so the customer gets exactly what they want in real time, as opposed to like, hold on, I got to email this off, or hold on, I got to make this change. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Like, we want it to be like this. And then it needs to be done in a way that's so beautiful and engaging the customer enjoys the experience. It's a delightful experience. That empowers the sales rep and empowers the company. It provides a platform where they feel even better about their job and they love where they work. Now the owners can focus on things like, how do I provide better value to my reps, as opposed to just withholding the one piece of information that keeps them sticky to me, which is hiding something. Like, if the only thing keeping a rep loyal to the company is they don't know, you're waiting for a bomb to blow up.
Well, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think companies should be focused on providing more value so that things like that doesn't matter. But I will push back a little bit on
Please.
The idea that they're doing it specifically because they don't want reps to be smarter, I guess, or more intelligent about that. I think that from a management perspective, I think anyone would agree that it's easier if we were going to do quality control. It's much easier to manage quality control if we have a team of 3 compared to a team of 10. And I think that's probably the biggest reason why they do it, especially in solar, where the turnover is so high and you have new employees coming in and the old employees going out every single week. I mean, I could see from a management perspective how making sure that reps are at least the way the industry currently is, making sure that reps are trained to adequately create a proposal. I mean, you're talking about adding another day of onboarding for reps that come in and are probably more likely going to be gone within 3 months. And so overall, it's more about improving the industry and kind of maturing it a little bit to a point where you have companies that don't have that high turnover, companies that actually provide real value to their reps and provide them with just training and skills and seminar and stuff that you can't get at other companies. And once you're able to do that and you're able to reduce your turnover, at that point, you have invested your time and energy into people, and then you can give them kind of that more responsibility. And I do think that is where solar is going for sure. I want to ask you about, because you said the main reason is for, the main reason was to kind of give people a single login. So like say a rep or a manager or business owner right now wanted to check out Sunobi, like how does that work for them? Do they come in and do they manually enter their EPCs in the different regions? Like how does one sign up for that, and how does your software make it easy for them to kind of get set up with Sunobi in whatever market they're looking at today?
Yeah. Great question, and I do appreciate the pushback on that thought about.
Well, no, I realized as I was pushing back, I was like, that was my point about like not trusting the reps. But I don't necessarily, like I said, I don't think. I think from a rep's perspective, it's easy to see it and think like, oh, they're doing that because they don't trust me. Yeah. And I think it's probably more of just we're doing it because it's easier for us to manage the quality and the quality control. If we're managing a smaller team that's probably in the same building as us, compared to if we're to manage and quality control people that are out on the doors every single day.
And I would say that part of the reason why that thought process exists is because the comment that you made in the middle of that, which is the way the industry currently is.
Yes.
We make these kind of judgment calls based on what we know and based on what tools we have to work with today. And so if we're really going to become innovative as a company, we have to imagine something different than what currently exists. Like making micro improvements on the current software isn't really solving a problem. We have to be able to provide something that's dramatically different, that changes and disrupts the industry in a way that's unique. So those problems you're talking about, like the inherent problems of distrust or quality control or tighter management on those kinds of things, those are problems that we currently talk about simply because the way the industry is structured. Because the tools that exist, if technology changes that, where those things don't become, if you're not worried about quality control anymore, because the tech's that good, like what else are you going to spend your resources and the time doing instead of that? Like, man, how much better of a company can we become if we're not worried about the quality control? Or how much better of a company can we become if we're not worried about the reps being dishonest? Because the vast majority, like 95% of them, are honest because the tool enables that and rewards that behavior. So that's what we wanted to build. And I say those things not to point a finger at like a specific company or a specific individual, but to say the industry, because of the way it's structured, creates some of these negative feelings between people, or these places where this idea of not having an abundant mentality can exist. And we want to have an abundant mentality. We want people to be competitive. We want people to go grow. We want innovation. We want to change the framework of how things work structurally on a software standpoint and on a sales standpoint and an install standpoint with Sunobi. So that's the thrust, right?
And with that abundance mindset too, I mean, it's worth for me to throw out there that there are certain reps that don't want to design the proposals. They don't want to actually manage they probably like that they just send it, someone else sends it back to them and they sit down and sell. And so there is a place for that, but there's also needs to be an opportunity for reps that where that prefer to create it themselves, or that they know that they can trust themselves and they're more of an expert. And they probably would maybe be more open to Sunobi. But I do think that there are people that even if Sunobi achieves all of its wildest dreams and it becomes like this super powerful tool for a rep, there's still going to be reps that would prefer the other way of just like, I just want to sell. And that's
possible too in Sunobi.
Yeah. And that's the thing with these softwares is there's opportunity for all of them to thrive and kind of serve a different market base. And the type of market that you guys are approaching and going after is just kind of the savvy solar experienced business owners that haven't had this tool in their pocket yet, and they would definitely be open to it.
That, and definitely the new ones as well. And if there was a company that wanted to do that model where they just wanted to kind of keep that in-house and send those proposals off to the reps, that tool's built inside of Sunobi too. They can do that. And we just didn't want to limit someone to one thing and say this is the only way to do it. We wanted to provide a structure that allowed them to be creative inside their own skill set, knowing that it was powerful enough to return what they needed. To the other question you asked about, how does someone get onboarded if they wanted to log in, which I wouldn't say that's the most important thing we solved, but it certainly was an important problem to solve. But we don't get in the middle of the relationship or the contract negotiation between a sales org and an EPC. So that's not something that we do, right? So if a sales org comes to Sunobi and they say, hey, we want to use Sunobi, and they have their installers that they want to put on the platform, we will service that and onboard their installers' different variables onto the platform. So their login is the same, but no matter where they log in, they can have whichever installer is specific to them in that area that they choose. So that login would be homogeneous no matter where they go, pulls up all the variables once they choose the installer at the beginning of the process. All their variables spin up and they have access to whoever they want. And then the onboarding process that we're really, really excited to be rolling out in the next couple of days tackles what I think is one of the largest problems in the industry, which is hierarchy. And I'm really excited for that to be debuted. And it allows a rep to onboard their own teams, show it in a really beautiful visual way, and manage their baselines, manage all of their pay scales, their installers, and do all the onboarding essentially themselves in an automatic or a self-serving way, which really speeds up the entire process as opposed to sending stuff in and having someone manually do it for you.
So you're speaking of, it kind of allows them to manage their own sales organization within your software. Is that right?
Absolutely. So recruiting is a big issue, right? Or things that I shouldn't say issue. Recruiting is a big part of this industry in the sales world. And so you could essentially inside of Sunobi create your own pod of recruits that you're working with. And once you have them signed, you can drop them into a team no matter where they are. So again, imagine that you have a sales team in Georgia, one in Florida, one in Texas, one in California, and one in Utah, for example. And each one of those states has their own EPC. Well, currently the way it stands, you need to with our competitors that would exist, or even without a competitor, to onboard those. Sometimes each EPC, each state would have maybe a different price structure or pay scale for each rep because the economics are slightly different in each place, which means that you have to kind of keep track of that manually, and the rep would have to too. With Sunobi, you can essentially create conditions where a rep can be assigned to an infinite number of installers, an infinite number of states, and all the variables could track with it. So you may sell in Georgia and pull up EPC B, and then go down to Florida and have another one. If it's a virtual sale or you're doing a blitz, you can then pull up, as you start to sell, your baselines would be commensurate with where you're at, and that's all automatic and done through you as the sales manager or the owner of the company. You can do it on your own. You don't need to have someone else help you, which is great because then you can keep track of all your own stuff the way you want, and the minute you want to change it or move or drop a rep or add them or change their baseline, it's instantaneous. And that automatically reflects through all their pricing, all their proposals, all their structures with all their EPCs across the board. It's pretty rad.
No, it sounds, I mean, that's definitely when we're talking about what companies can do to provide more value to their reps. I mean, that's something that we're seeing, I think, from several companies out there right now. And that's something that's the value, is because right now everything is kind of like duct taped together, where you have solutions and softwares, and there's companies that sell in 4 different states and they have 3 different proposal softwares. Yep. And or there's companies that do things like their marketing is all done through Google Sheets, which actually some of those companies are the best companies actually calling the leads and setting appointments. But regardless, I think you're kind of, in a way, you're approaching it as it is more than a proposal software, but your software itself is going to be a tool that can tie together reps in different states and different installers and kind of provide them with almost like a singular hub that allows for them to easily manage and give more power and freedom to sales reps. Because I mean, if you're a successful sales rep, it's not long before you're looking to grow your own team and share and build and things like that. Yeah. And as of right now, it's not necessarily the easiest or the most transparent in order to not the easy or most transparent process to kind of make that transition. You're kind of told, oh, well, here's the red line you can give your guys, and that's the lowest we'll go until blah, 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 blah. And then obviously everything in this industry seems to be not as transparent as it should be. And it seems like you guys are big believers in transparency.
So much so. We part of our core values is to have, we've read the books by Ray Dalio, and we're a fan of his, but one of his core concepts is radical transparency. And so that means that we have to be that way as a company to each other. If Titus and I are having an argument about the way we should go from a strategy standpoint, I mean, there's no punches pulled. Like, we get after it, and it's not just about like logical conversations, it's also emotional ones. And so we believe in having radical transparency within the company, and certainly providing that aspect as a piece of software to the rest of the nation as we can. We believe in doing that. You actually scale faster, you grow more, you grow quicker. The more you hide stuff, the more that kind of idea, like, all we're really doing is stunting our own growth. Truthfully,
I think I definitely think it does stunt growth as long as there are competitors out there that are promoting transparency, because ultimately they're probably going to be the people that win. I think really what they're just doing is they're taking a few extra dollars today rather than keeping the rep happy for years and years to come. And once again, it kind of goes back to that abundance mindset. Let me ask you, from a solar perspective, so sales, door-to-door sales, being a solar rep, growing your business is, I'm sure, completely different than the software side of things that have kind of come along with growing this proposal. So my question to you is, coming up with the idea for like a transparent proposal software is awesome, but then actually putting it into work is, I'm sure there was a lot of things that you didn't expect that came up. What has been like the biggest kind of struggle with that transition or challenge that you've faced on the software side of building a proposal / solar hub?
Man, that's a great question, because they are so different. Like, software and sales companies, or even install companies, and
even selling the software is different than selling a big purchase item. So
I mean, that part so far has actually been fairly easy for us, just because I think the way we've got Sunobi set up from a sales standpoint, like the way we offer it, I think is conducive for closing deals. We're closing customers who want to come on board to Sunobi. But to answer your immediate question, I think the hardest part, and to maintain that transparent ideology, was learning how to say we missed a deadline in software. Software is just, I mean, you set goals with sales reps. Like, you have a correlation meeting, and you're writing on the board, like, how many are you going to get, right? And it's like, you can break it down to how many doors knocked, to, how long you're on the doors, and you can control that. Like, you can control how many doors you knock and how many hours you're on the streets. You can control that. Some of the other stuff you can't as much, but there are direct correlations to it, and you can create these deadlines for yourself that you can hit. And we've learned how to do that. Software's not the same. And the reason it isn't the same is because we're building something that's never been built before. And so the analogy that we talk about constantly together is, we're building a plane while we're flying it. And so it's like, we're in midair, and you realize that, man, I built this thing, but it also needs a tail wing, and we didn't have that initially. If you know the tail wing, it's gonna, you can't control the rudder as well. So you end up, while you're mid-flight, you're back there trying to fix it, and in the meantime, everyone that's passengers in the plane are like, hey, like, when are we gonna have a stabilization here? Because right now it's super rocky and bumpy, and the turbulence is terrible. And you're like, bro, I'm trying to figure this out right now. I don't know how long it's gonna take. So, like, learning how to have a conversation where you're still setting good expectations, but you can't actually accurately predict how long something's going to take to build, is a really hard adjustment for someone who has built a business based on hitting numbers, that here's your goals, hitting the metrics on this week, this month, this year. Like that part's been tough.
It's the linear progression of it, right? The dependency that you have on not only yourself but other people to get done with their tasks, which is, if you're the difference between like having a sales team, everyone goes and knocks their doors. The difference is if one of those people doesn't hit their goal for the month, number one, there's always next month, like there's a next opportunity to kind of bounce back. But then the difference with software working on something like a project together is if that person doesn't hit their goal, everyone else is like, they're waiting. They can't move on until that goal is hit.
Everyone's dependent on it. Yeah.
So it's definitely because I do a lot with other projects in my life that I've used project management software and Gantt charts and Kanban boards, and like understanding how people work together to create something and plan something. And that's something that I've learned with other types of projects is pretty much it almost never gets done as quickly as you would like. And so it's easy to put timelines out there and put due dates, and then one person falls behind a due date and everything else gets pushed back. I'm thinking of the show Silicon Valley. There's a I can't remember exactly. There's a great scene where it's like the CEO of the company is talking, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we expect this to be basically we expect this product to be dominating the market within 2 months." And then the next person's like, "Did he just say 2 months?" He's like, "Doesn't he know that we're already behind by 3 weeks?" And then the people that are like the next level below are like, "Did you just say we're behind by 3 weeks? That means we're behind down here by 9 weeks." Basically, there's all this. The point of it was there's all these levels of management, they're not communicating, and because of that, everything's going to be pushed back time and time. But that's really how it is with any project, is if you're reliant on other people and someone misses the deadline, which is natural, then it pushes things behind. I can see that definitely being frustrating for someone who's always been kind of maintain sole ownership of their goals and making the activity themselves, and not having to be told that they have to wait for something to be released. And I could see that being challenging for sure.
It's a challenge, man. And I think I say that knowing that what we've produced in such a short period of time is more of a testament to the talent that we've assembled than it is to, anybody cracking a whip. That's just the people that are a part of Sunobi, from the art standpoint to the tech side are man, they're the cream of the crop. They're the cream of the crop.
So tell me about that, because you just said from the art side, which I think is probably different than a lot of people or a lot of the competitors out there. Is when I was exposed to Sunobi a month or two ago, that was one of the things that is one of the first things you notice, is that these proposals are just flat out beautiful. They are beautiful. They have moving pictures and graphics, and they are able to present the story and explain things in a way it's beautiful. And it's not that other softwares that aren't beautiful themselves, but they're more beautiful in the same, a sales presentation way. They're it feels like a sales presentation, where yours felt almost like an interactive spec sheet in a way. Can you tell me what is it that who was the person that kind of brought the art side to it, and then what has your goals been to kind of create this beautiful proposal software?
Yeah, I can talk to some of that. I would say that some pieces of that we keep close to the vest, from just what makes the DNA of Sunobi unique, but principally, Titus, who's the CIO of the company, Titus Karaz, and an equal partner with me, he's really kind of the magician in the cave that makes all this stuff happen. His vision and mindset, he does not want to have something not look beautiful. And so I will admit that I'm often one to say, which again, back to what was hard for me, but I'm often one to say, dude, this is good enough. Let's push it out. And he's the one to push back and say, no, it's not. And it doesn't look good enough. And this could be better, and this could be cleaner, and this could be simpler. So that's been a lesson for me to learn too, that over time, it is better to wait for it to be up to the standard that that is now on brand for Sunobi, rather than just frantically pushing something out for the sake of pushing it out. Our goal when we were going down this road again was, like I said at the beginning, one of our core values is to create something that's delightful. And so when you think of like an experience that's delightful, I wouldn't say that any proposal to date about solar was delightful. It was maybe informative, and maybe it was efficient or effective, but none of them were like, hey, that was beautiful. Thank you. That was a wonderful experience. Like, so we wanted that to happen. We wanted the customer to feel like it was more of an immersive sort of experience in solar, and that they could see themselves there rather than someone telling them what it was. And we live in an age, in a world right now, where most people are entertained by stories all the time, and they spend their time on Instagram or whatever. They're watching reels or TikToks, or they're watching, movies and TV shows. I mean, in this very meeting, you reference a TV show, right, about being entertained, but it's still teaching a business principle, but you're being entertained by a story. Solar should be sold as an entertaining story, one that has benefits and consequences, and one that talks about prestige and talks about price and profit and pleasure and all these things that are important to selling a deal, but it should also be displayed in a way that is pleasing to the eye. So when we went about doing it, the entire approach was, how do we make this as beautiful as we possibly can and still be fast?
I love it. I mean, it's, and I agree. I like that you are it's a marketing, really. That's what really it is like you guys are creating a sales software from more of the marketing perspective, where if you market, the great thing about solar is if you can market it properly, then the sale is easy. I mean, that's kind of why we both have alluded to loving this industry so much. And that's one of the things that I love about marketing, and is that the best marketing is when people are able to tell stories. And that's something that I've been preparing. One of my New Year's resolutions is eventually this year I'm going to be getting into a stand-up comedy, and like telling stand-up comedy, one of the most important things is being able to just kind of tell engaging stories. And the reason you do that is because people are able to follow stories, they remember stories, they're able to engage, they're able to picture themselves in the story, and that's how you're able to be informative and entertaining. And if you can do that on the sales side, you can find success as well. Like another example would be, I remember when I interviewed for a job 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember my strategy for the interview was simple. It was just like I knew what the job's role was. I knew what the different kinds of like things the job was responsible for, and so I had like 5 or 6 stories from past work experiences that I had. I was like, okay, and this is a story that I have that I can tell, and it kind of it shows how leadership is important, how I value leadership. And I had like a kind of handful of different stories like that. And I remember I did the interview and I crushed it. And but I remember I was working with people that are like 2 decades older than me, and like later, like a year later, they're like, yeah, that was like the best interview I've ever seen from anybody. And I was like, oh, really? I was like, wow, cool. Because I didn't realize, but the reason I had success with that interview was because my strategy was, I want to have stories to portray this, and I want to have a story to portray that. And when you're able to do that, you're able to give answers to questions in a way that is memorable, and it's really just good marketing. And when you can do that on a proposal side, that's something that really is kind of unique, and that we don't see out there currently. And it also like hearing you talk, it reminds me of kind of like the same philosophy that we have with Apple. With like Apple's philosophy for, and that is a compliment, like designing equipment. And like, I remember I watched that, the Steve Jobs documentary, once again, another story, another pop culture movie reference. But like his thing was him and Wozniak kind of like had completely different ideas of what made computers special. And Steve Jobs was all about it being sleek, and he wanted the interface and everything to feel intuitive, and like he is the reason that Apple kind of is the way that the company that it's grown to be. And your proposal software kind of seems to have the same values of that as well. I'm laughing because I'm thinking now it's like, now I just pictured you guys having a commercial where it's like, hey, I'm Apple, and it's your guys' software proposal, and all the other guys guys are the PCs, and it just makes you cooler than them. But
that's very kind to say. I think it would be disingenuous for us to assume that Apple hasn't played a major role in how we think about tech and how we think about software and things being intuitive. I still remember the first time I got an iPhone and telling everyone beforehand, because I had a BlackBerry like probably everybody else did, and like, I think you really want to have tactile buttons. Everyone really wants to feel that stuff, And then as soon as I got one in my hand, it felt like I had art in my hand. And like the iPhone felt like it was a piece of art. And you look at their commercials, how they go about projecting an image to someone, it is about prestige, right? Like they're showing the beauty of like gears coming together and like close-up versions of like, stuff coming together in a mechanical way, as if that is the definition of what beauty is. Because they're describing to you, like, we built something that's so precise and amazing, it's going to feel different in your hands. It will feel prestigious. Look at how good the materials are. Look at how good the graphics are. We put this chip in so it's faster, so that your experience as a consumer is improved. So when we're going about everything with Sunobi, I can't lie and say that hasn't influenced us. Like, we very much want, when people pick up Sunobi, for it to be as intuitive as it possibly can be from start to finish, which means that we're trying to tackle every variable and frequently asked question and objection that comes up in solar, right? So you can have a proposal, but then as the rep who doesn't know yet, or as a newer rep, and the customer asks a question that is one of 10 commonly asked objections, if you don't know that answer, you're stuck as a rep, and you're like, and you kind of fumble, and then you miss the deal, and you're like, dang it, that's the learning lesson, right? And you come back and you become a better rep. And I don't want to short circuit that, but at the same time, I want to put those questions in there that a rep can easily go to, and it pulls up a beautiful image, overcoming the objection with the customer in a way that doesn't take away the sales rep's ability to have their own word track, but does put images there where someone can then talk to it, and it makes them look so much more professional and clean, and the customer visually sees the story unfolding while the customer or the rep is telling them, and it becomes intuitive, but the answer is. The real true great sale is when the customer comes to the conclusion on their own, not when they've been convinced. And if you can help someone come to the conclusion on their own, like good marketing, what happens is that the customer's like, this was a wonderful experience. This was a delight. And I can't wait to tell someone else about it. That's when we know we've succeeded. And so far, to our standard, there hasn't been a piece of tech or a piece of software that enabled that. And we wanted to build something that did. Besides all the other academic things like, I'm going to make this easier and this process simpler and make it quicker to sell deals. Yes, all those true. But we also want it to be something when a rep gets in their hands, they're like, this is beautiful. And when a customer sees it, they have the same reaction. And the experience then together is amplified. Not like, we don't want the tech to be a divider in the process. We want it to be something that brings them together and be like, this is incredible. Maybe that's all romantic and not totally realistic, but keep trying for it.
No, it's not at all. And I'll tell you, I've talked to a lot of solar reps. A lot of them haven't even been recorded. And like, one of the things that you realize is that good and great salespeople, when they have that story about an awesome sale, or that they have where the customer, they were just flowing, they were gelling with the customer, at the end of their presentation, the customer was asking them like, okay, what's the next step? Like, when the customer asks you that, it's like, yes. And like, that's like I have told a couple times, I had a customer once that I got him on the phone, and I swear we talked 45 minutes about football. And then by the end of it, it took 5 minutes about solar, and then he was like, okay, yeah, I'm ready. Like, what's the next step? And I was like, that was an awesome sales. Like, that was awesome. Like, that's how I wish every sales call would go. But when I've talked to these people, one of the things that I realized now that I'm sitting here thinking about it is, all the people that got to that moment, they didn't do it with a proposal. Meaning they were either doing it on their own, or the proposal was like, they used a proposal just to reference points A and B. It wasn't the people that walk through a proposal slide by slide. Number one, I don't like that to begin with, but it's very hard to have that, just that sales presentation slide by slide feel and get the customer to that point. And so then you get to the thing where it's back to kind of how you feel with alarms, where maybe you have to be a little bit pushy at the end of your presentation just because that's the way everything's set up. And what I like about your guys' tool is you guys are kind of shooting for something that I don't think is out there, which is providing the true salesperson the ability to do everything the same way, have that conversation, build that rapport, but address all of the objections the way that they normally would, but having an assisting presentation and resource to utilize that. Because that is something that I think I've realized is I don't think I've ever heard anyone tell me a story about like having like the best sale, or like really getting to that point where the customer was what they did to make the customer all excited. And most of the times the people that I talk to, they don't even use presentations, they don't even use slideshows, just because the way that they go about it is so free flowing that they haven't found a resource that they've been able to use yet.
That's right. And I think that we all probably know that guy or that girl, that sales rep, that sales professional that can create that experience kind of on their own, just by their own dynamic nature. But that's really hard to scale, right? Like to have that experience you described where, you know, the dynamics have to be just right, to duplicate that thing over and over and over and over again is really, really hard. So if we can find a way to provide the best chance for that to happen over and over and over again, that's what we're shooting for. We want to create a regular rep into a really dynamic rep, just by virtue of the tools. It's hard enough for a rep to get out and go knock doors. It's hard. It takes enough courage to go out there and say, I'm going to go sit in front of someone I don't know and ask them for $40,000 or $60,000, or if you're in Florida, $120,000. Like that. That takes enough courage, right, to be able to do that.
If there's any new solar reps listening, don't tell the customer, like, don't throw those numbers out there when you're talking about the cost of the project.
But it's still there, right?
I know it's there. It's just, it's like, yeah, you know, but when you say it that way, it's like, yeah, it sounds so big compared to like, I mean, 150, if compared to paying $150 a month, it is a large
But even
amount.
then, if we went to the monthly payment, you said, I'm going to take you from alarm sales, right? You're asking someone to spend 40, and now I guess sometimes with some of these bigger ones are $80 a month, or however they're financing it, right? Mixed up the equipment versus, you know, MMR, whatever. I mean, you're getting to a point where you're going from some number that's certainly less to a number that's much, much more on solar on a monthly basis. That, regardless of what we're doing, we're asking someone to have courage to go ask someone to change their life, to change something about their life. That takes courage. So to give them a tool that doesn't enable that, or it's like, I'm not going to really help you out beyond here's the number, now you go be dynamic. You're asking someone to become amazing quickly, right? So the attrition that you're talking about that happens in a sales organization sometimes happens just because we're asking someone to turn into someone else far faster than they're actually capable of doing. It's like you get the sales manager up there who's smashing it, and he's super dynamic, or she's super dynamic and has this 10 years of experience, or they've been knocking on these doors. They can turn any conversation into a great sale. And you get the new guy who's in there and he's like, I don't know if I can do that. And you're like, dude, here's the tool. And you give him a PDF with some moving parts and he's supposed to go close it. Like, it's not that he can't. It's just that, like, the transition from that greenie to the point where he's an absolute beast is a long transition. And you're asking someone to have a tremendous amount of patience and self-discipline to get there. If you can just facilitate that transition faster by giving someone a tool, they can answer things quicker, makes them look better, more professional, things are more beautiful, takes some of the pressure off them, like, that guy's transition becomes even better. It doesn't mean he doesn't still need to get there. He does, but the transition's smoother and simpler because the tech he has enables it more than becomes a stumbling block. So if we can make it that way, then the rep will end up saying, again, back to the word, that was a delight. And the customer will say the same thing, that was a delight, because the experience was great. And they come to their own conclusions and they enjoy it. And when they enjoy it, they want to do it again. Instead of like, man, that was a slog, but at least I got paid a bunch of money.
Yeah, So that actually brings me to my last question I have for you, and then I'll let you go. But I'll definitely continue this conversation some other time, I'm sure. And one of the things too is we'll include a link to check out Sunobi in the description of this video, wherever it's posted. And then I'll also most likely be doing a screen share walkthrough where we can show them how beautiful that is. But my question for you is kind of what you're talking about with, like, this is a delight. So with your guys' mission, like making something delightful, and kind of you're creating a software that helps solar reps, but at the same time, it also has to be convincing on customers and homeowners. What if, when you guys are looking at it from the management and design side, like which one did you give more priority to, the solar rep or the homeowner? I guess, like, if you had to make a decision based on, is this is more important for the sales side, or this is more important, like, for, I guess I can see how they would be, you can obviously address both, but when you guys were designing this, were you designing it to enable sales reps, or to make a software that's able to convert homeowners?
It's the same thing to us. But if you're asking me to prioritize how we viewed it from a sales rep standpoint first. If the sales rep is confident in a home, the sales rep closes more deals. If the sales, I mean, again, the goal is to close deals, right? Like, so you look at it from a standpoint of, how do I enable a sales rep to have a better experience? How do I make it delightful for the sales rep? If it's delightful for the sales rep, they have an easier chance of closing the deal because they're confident from a customer. Customers buy confidence all day long. No customer's like, can't wait to buy from the guy who, like, can't spit it out or is afraid of the answer because he doesn't know. You know, like, it's 150. Like, no one's buying that. You know what I mean? So if you create the software that first focuses on, how do I help the rep look and feel better in the home and sound better in the home, more articulate, give them the chance to have a better presentation tool at their disposal, give them a chance to be more dynamic. So when a customer says, well, I think I actually want to change to this, what other options do you have? Then you can do it on the fly instantly, right? I mean, we had a short story. I was down in Florida this last week training a team on how to use Sunobi, and they had some new recruits in there that were there literally for the first day. And one guy that was there was like, I don't know if I actually want to do this. I've got this other gig I really like. And so he was kind of on the fence about whether or not he wanted to do it. Ultimately, he decided he didn't want to go sell solar, right? But I was trying to help people understand that if you can explain all the key elements inside of Sunobi, then you're good to go. Like, that's all you need to know. You can grow from there, but that's the basics, right? So this guy that ended up saying he didn't want to work selling solar, he's sitting next to me. I said, let's just use your house as an example. And he's one of the guys that had a house there, right? So it was effective. So we pull up his house, and I'm going through the design with him. So he's looking at the rep-facing view, but now he's sitting there as a homeowner thinking about maybe getting solar, right? Or at least he's pretending that he's going to be a customer. So we go through the stuff, and I said, now you be real with me. And I drew the proposal, and it's like, 30 seconds later, he's got a proposal. He's looking at his roof, and he's kind of like, this is fun. That was great. You did that fast? It's already done? I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, what else do you want to know? And the reps, they're all watching, trying to see how this thing works for the first time. He says on the fly, yeah, but I think I might need a new roof. Well, that's in almost every other scenario, that's a challenge. Then you're going like, okay, I'll get you a roof bid and come back and give you another quote, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, no problem, let's put a roof bid in there. So I pull up the adder list, I go into the adders, and the rep who's in that area knows what his roof costs are. And I said, what's the roof? And he says, well, it's this cost. And the guy says, but what kind of roof is that? And they start getting this conversation about roofing, right? We end up settling on a metal roof that he wants. So I can plug in the metal roof cost. He watches me do it. I hit enter. The new monthly payment pops up. He looks at it and he's like, that's it? That's what I get to do? And I'm like, yeah. And you get the tax credit on that and the tax credit on the solar and the whole bit. And it's going to be great. And then we walk through the tax credit. And he's like, this is so easy. Why haven't people bought this yet? And everyone in the room's cracking up, right? Because all these new reps are watching this guy get closed on the spot. But it turned from a demo of like, let me show you how Sunobi works and how you can answer questions, to, because of how dynamic it was, it made it really easy for a guy who was watching me go through this and already knew what the commission structure was, right? They went through the commission, how much, he didn't even care. He just wanted solar on his house, and he wanted it because he didn't know you could do both, and it made it that much easier. Now, Sunobi doesn't answer the question, can you do it both, right? It just makes it easier to answer the question. You don't, right? You don't need Sunobi to answer whether or not you can put a roof and solar together. But if you can do it very quickly and make it super dynamic, so when the guy asks the questions, you can answer them right then. Once the objections have been answered, you can get right to the next part, which is, are we doing this or not?
Right. Yeah,
That'd
I like it.
Light, right?
And I think part of what this conversation has helped me realize is a lot of what makes a lot of frustrations that we have as solar reps, and a lot of the reason why solar reps don't necessarily use proposal softwares is because it's a proposal software. Like, it's literally, that's the whole purpose, is to draft up a proposal that's like similar to something that you send out for a bid, which is it's just different than kind of the way that we, yeah, exactly. It's different than a sales resource that aids the salesperson. So sure. It doesn't give the freedom away. And obviously I think that's kind of the difference, is that, and I can see why at the beginning you're like, well, it's not necessarily a proposal platform. We do proposals, but there's a lot more to it. And it's because you are approaching it from a different aspect, where the proposal is actually probably came from other industries that have proposals. And that's when someone came to solar, like, oh, we need a proposal software. And instead of the natural conversation and free flowing give and take of information, so that you're able to overcome their objections with not only the right information, but also pretty and impactful graphics. I think that's pretty cool. So anyone that's watching this that would possibly be interested in chatting with you or learning more and reaching out, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Just send an email to info@sunobiapp.com, sunobiapp.com, info@sunobiapp.com, and then we can get in touch and kind of walk through the whole model with you and answer whatever questions you have. Yeah, man. Well,
I mean, I can't tell you, I greatly appreciate your time. I loved this interview because it's different than a lot of times I'm speaking with like solar sales guys, which obviously you're a solar sales guy, but I'm talking to them about building their teams and what they've learned and what they've done. And like, what I like about this is you have all that, but we're talking about something that you've been working on the side, and it's like behind the scenes, and understanding the difficulties and kind of the mindset behind building a proposal, like a software, a sales enablement software. It is just really fascinating to me, and it's definitely interested me, and I hope it has kept everyone else that might be listening entertained as well. So thank you so much for your time, man. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to put a link down in the bottom. Like I said, I saw Sunobi a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and the biggest thing was that, like, the two things that I remember that like struck me that day was like, wow, this is completely different. Like, this is the way you're able to incorporate and kind of incorporate your different installers and EPCs in different markets. The way you're able to set that up is completely incredible. Like, that's the way it should be. And it was also beautiful. And then with the stuff that it sounds like you guys are rolling out, it sounds like it's going to be, I have a feeling things are going to be a little bit more busy for you guys, which is awesome. I'm sure that's what you guys want. So I'll put a link down below. Anyone who's interested, you can check it out. And until next time, I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. Appreciate this. It was wonderful.
What's up, everybody? This is Kyle. Again, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Solar Growth Show. My hair, this is why I wear hats like every day, because I like my hair long and it's always a mess. But I appreciate you guys watching this. While you're here, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, whatever you can do to support the channel and get future videos, so that you can grow your solar business and your solar company, and we can continue to make this industry and this world a better place. So until next time, thank you, and take care.